Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in about one more minute. I'm just going to allow a minute for a few more folks to come in. It's great to see some of you that have been to some of our sessions previously. So good to see everyone today. All right, so you're here for the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Grant Program, where we're going to be talking about round two of our funding for infrastructure for extreme heat. And today we have two guests from the city of Phoenix to talk about work that the city of Phoenix has been doing both on extreme heat and urban agriculture. So in terms of the agenda today, um, we'll go a little over the extreme heat grant program. We'll talk a little bit about round two of the grant program, which is currently available to apply to. Then the City of Phoenix will go, and then we will have a Q&A session that we will not have recorded today. And then we will have an opportunity for some additional resources and contact information for us. So round two of the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Grant Program, we have $27.5 million available. This is coming from greenhouse gas reduction funds, which is California's cap and trade program, as well as from the Prop 4 climate bond that voters in California voted on in November of 2024, which is $10 billion for climate action investments. And specifically, both of these types of money want to see physical infrastructure built. So we will be using this $27.5 million to fund physical infrastructure. Now, with that in mind, we have four main values that are driving what we are funding in this grant round. Harm reduction, meaning that we're trying to reduce heat-related illness, heat death, and reduce the other health impacts of extreme heat. Um, Partnership, meaning that we know that effective solutions require both community knowledge and implementation capacity, and that we're asking every grant that comes to us have both that community knowledge in a CBO or organization that can drive that component, as well as an organization that is a known implementer and can make sure that they're able to build the infrastructure that they say they're going to build. Then we have the belonging component that ensures that infrastructure is designed with and for the people that use it. And then lastly, lasting community benefits. This means like the investment should go beyond the immediate output. So like, yes, you're building a shade structure, but how are you getting ready to build the next 10 shade structures? Or yes, you're building, a food forest, but how are you preparing your city to build the next 10 food forests? So the two types of money allow us to do slightly different things. So we have two grant types, our early infrastructure type, where you're going to be creating a planning document for heat infrastructure. And it can either be sort of a broader heat infrastructure action plan, or it can be an infrastructure for a particular kind of heat investment, like a cool corridor master plan. And then there is a requirement to have an infrastructure demonstration project. So you have to build something that's in line with your planning document. Then with the advanced infrastructure, that's a larger infrastructure that you need to be able to build in the 48-month period of the grant term. And then we also ask you to develop a future implementation playbook. That's that lasting impact component where you're creating guidelines or uh, design standards or some way of pointing to how you're going to implement or funding strategies, some way that you're going to point to how that kind of infrastructure is going to be built in your jurisdiction for years to come. And so in this case, it would be the construction of a 1 or 2 mile cool corridor with a future implementation playbook that would help you figure out how you're going to expand cool corridors throughout your jurisdiction. So eligible projects, we're able to fund built environment solutions, nature-based solutions, and then we love to also fund combinations of both. So those are all eligible projects. in terms of a little bit more about how the money gets spent. So the early infrastructure projects, 30-month projects, 750,000 to $1.2 million projects, 20 to 60% of your budget needs to be on that demonstration project. So you could do a more demonstration project heavy project, or you could do a more planning heavy project with a smaller demonstration project. So we want to give you that flexibility. And then we do have requirements about how much money you're spending on your partnership and on your belonging initiative. So we have requirements there of 8% of your budget for partnerships and 4% for belonging for that early. For advanced, it's a 48-month project. It's $3 to $4.5 million. A minimum of 70% of your total project needs to be spent on infrastructure, and then 6% for partnerships and 2% for your belonging initiative. So we have priority points, and we have an upcoming webinar that determine if you can get additional points for your project, depending on whether you're a tribe or your project's in a severely disadvantaged community, or if your project is serving a heat vulnerable part of California. And then in terms of who can apply, you heard me talk about it some. Local and regional public entities, we're asking you to have a CBO or California Native American tribe partner. CBOs, we're asking you to have a local or regional public entity or a tribe as a partner. Academic institutions and coalitions, we're asking you to have both. And then tribes are exempt from our partnership requirement. So in terms of the rest of this process, we have our pre-application window is closing August 11th. So you have to get your ideas to us by August 11th. And then you'll get some feedback. You'll get a green, go ahead, yellow. We have some concerns, red. We have a lot of concerns about your project idea. And then you'll get the full application to fill out. And then they are due October 13th. And the full application includes the narrative sections where you're answering our questions, a complete budget and work plan, and then also other supporting documents. So in terms of the timeline, full applications are due October 13th, and we're hoping to make these award announcements in early 2027. All right, so now to two very close collaborators of mine from my time in Arizona, I would like to introduce Maddie Mercer, the Food Systems Program Manager at the City of Phoenix, and then Dave Hondula, the Director of Heat Response and Heat Mitigation at the City of Phoenix. We're going to hear first from Maddie and then from Dr. Hondula. And I think one thing to say is we actually got some really interesting applications from round one that we're understanding that investments in urban agriculture are cooling investments. And it works in a few different ways. Obviously, anything that involves vegetation involves cooling, but a lot of the routes, one of the things that Maddie and I discovered or worked on quite a bit when we were thinking about this work at the city of Tempe is that a lot of the routes in which you think about food access are also ways that you can get water access, or you can get fan access, or the other things that might need to be distributed in a heat event are often using the same pathways that you would be using in terms of getting affordable food and food access to people. So urban agriculture and local food to me is absolutely heat preparedness and heat response work. It's not always seen that way, but I think we're all here today and Maddie's certainly here today to make the pitch on some of the work they've been doing in the city of Phoenix. And I want to pitch that we're totally willing to fund urban agriculture and food access work because we see it as being really critical to how communities also think about heat response. And with that, I'll pass it over to Maddie.
Okay, thank you, Braden, and hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you today. My name is Maddie Mercer. I am the Food Systems Program Manager for our Food Systems Program here in the Office of Environmental Programs. We love programs in the city of Phoenix. So today I'll share some of the work that we're doing to incorporate urban agriculture and community resilience projects to give you some inspiration for how food can be used as a tool for climate mitigation and adaptation. How cool that worked. All right, well, I'll give you to start some framing about our office and some of the different aspects that we have within it, and then I'll go more into detail of our food program and some of the initiatives that we have. So, like I said, I'm with the Office of Environmental Programs. Our mission is to advance environmental protection and sustainability And we do that through a variety of ways, but I've had them highlighted to color code them here. So we started out focused on this environmental protection with air, water quality, soil quality, and we've expanded to also encompass more sustainability related topics like climate and food systems. So our office houses the city's climate action plan, as well as our newly adopted food action plan. And I'll go more into what those mean in a minute. So this is just an overview of some of the different areas that our office has programs connected to. We have programs around surface water, stormwater, wildlife, including green stormwater infrastructure. Like I mentioned, we house the climate action program here in our office, as well as our food systems program. And then we also have a focus on that environmental quality, environmental protection side related to things like brownfields, hazardous waste and materials, and air quality. These are some pictures of some of our programs. And like I said, I'll mostly be talking about our food systems program, but I'll share some examples of some of how some of our stormwater and wildlife work and how they can kind of intersect with food systems and other heat mitigation work. So when it comes to our food systems program, we are guided by our 2050 goal that the city of Phoenix has adopted that says that all Phoenix residents will have enough to eat and have access to healthy, affordable, and culturally relevant food. And this is what guides our program. We have a strategic plan called our Food Action Plan that outlines different goals and strategies to help us meet this overarching goal related to things like food access, health, sustainability, business, and economic development. And our focus is really holistic. So I know Braden touched on urban agriculture, so production, growing of food, but our programs are all centered around the whole food system, all of the activities and people and different processes involved, from getting food from the farm, from where it's grown, to the people who are consuming it, and then thinking about even the next stage too with composting, recycling, diversion. So we try to take that holistic perspective into everything we do. And I think there's opportunities in each of those elements to think about heat response and community resilience. So today, I'm just going to highlight a couple of our relevant programs. We have other initiatives focused more on education for residents and businesses, but today I'm going to talk about some of our grant programs and pilot projects. So we have a resilient and sustainable agriculture grant program that I'll discuss, our food systems grant program, and some urban ag pilot projects. We've funded these with a variety of different funding mechanisms, some from the COVID-19 relief funding during the pandemic through the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, and we also have funding from the city's general fund to continue these programs into the future. So starting off, we have our Resilient and Sustainable Agriculture Grant Program. This was a program we started with ARPA funding and then received some funding from the USDA Farm Service Agency to continue. And the overall purpose of this program is to connect our local farmers within Maricopa County with infrastructure and technical assistance and support them to adopt new practices that help them to adapt to extreme heat and climate change. Because we know that while urban agriculture can be a tool for helping to cool down places, it's also simultaneously being impacted by extreme heat, which can make food production more difficult and then food security more of a challenge in an area. And so some of the example projects that we funded through this grant program include agrivoltaics. So that includes a combination of solar, so you could have solar panels and then be growing food under them, or you could be using solar power to power food production in really innovative ways. I'll talk about a pilot project that incorporates that later. We've also seen projects that incorporate shade structures and hoop houses, as well as better irrigation infrastructure to also include some water conservation elements, while again helping to adapt to some of the extreme heat and just really challenging climatic conditions that we've seen in Phoenix as the seasons have shifted and it's gotten hotter more frequently and faster. We also have projects in this program connected to rainwater harvesting. And then a big one has been integrating food forests and community orchards. So thinking both about what you're growing in the ground at a vegetable garden, but thinking about that whole vertical space where you can incorporate things like shrubs and trees to provide a multi-layered benefit. So for each of these, I'll give a little overview of the grant in the program, and then I'll give you some examples of the specific projects that have been funded and what they're doing. So for the Resilient and Sustainable Ag Grant, I have three of our wonderful grantees highlighted here. The first, Creighton Community Foundation, is doing an agrivoltaics project where they are installing a solar-powered shade canopy that's going to power their community garden site. It will, oops, spoilers. Okay, we're back. So their new solar structure is going to power their irrigation, their on-site food storage, all of their electric needs at the farm, and then also provide a shade over their production area, which will help to extend their season and provide some heat relief for the community gardeners at that site. Then the Orchard Community Learning Center, they've got orchard in the name, and they also are building out some more of this community orchard tree infrastructure in a neighborhood that is a food desert and is 4 miles away from the nearest grocery store. So their focus is building an urban agriculture education center that has a focus on incorporating nature-based practices into how they grow food. So they've embedded a rainwater harvesting system. There's a large greenhouse on the site that they're capturing rainwater off of. I think as of my last check-in with them, they've already captured over 270,000 gallons of water, and they're using that to go into their orchard and their pollinator garden space. And then they're using the site for education so they can do hands-on training on expanding these climate adaptation focused food production practices and having people take them and apply them at other sites around the valley. And then the last grantee that I'll highlight with this grant program is she grows at her homestead, her Silver Lining homestead. She's building a food forest, which is a multi-layer farming technique. So not just growing a vegetable plot and then an orchard somewhere else, but you're actually integrating different kinds of plants in the same space so that you're growing food more densely, and then you can provide benefits like the trees in the plot providing shade for the things lower down and creating more of an ecosystem instead of just a single monoculture. And so her project is focused specifically on moringa trees, which are fast growing and have a lot of health benefits, building in cover crops and other pollinator garden space. And there's a large focus on expanding irrigation efficiency, moving from flood irrigation to more efficient drip irrigation. And then again, another emphasis on education to share these practices with other growers in the region. All right. Then the next program that I'll highlight is our Food Systems Grant Program. So this was another COVID era program that we've continued on and have investments now ongoing in general funds. We'll be opening our applications for this in one day. So we're excited to see what other proposals we get. But our hope for this program is to be as broad and holistic as possible so that we can fund projects from across that whole food system, not just on the food production or the food access side, but everything in between. But for today, I'm going to highlight some projects that really connect to the need for expanded shade and cooling, as well as education and creating cool neighborhood spaces where people can come together and gather, build community, and also learn about how they can grow food, cook food, share and access food across their neighborhoods as well. So one of our former grantees was the Phoenix Food Cooperative, or the Phoenix Food Forest. Sorry, that's a typo. So they're a 1-acre food forest that is located at this larger Spaces of Opportunity site, another grant recipient. And on their food forest, they've built out a variety of native and shade trees, fruit-bearing trees that incorporate all these different layers of food production again, but their focus is really on traditional foods and creating opportunities for people to access indigenous foods that have grown in the desert, have been harvested by indigenous peoples for millennium. And they have a lot of training and workshops around how to grow and process these foods that we funded with this grant. And then they also have a focus on incorporating sustainable business practices into their model. They're a worker-owned cooperative, so that's a sustainable enterprise in itself, but they also incorporate solar to power their site, and then have a focus on water conservation and building in more of these different sustainability elements into their on-site operations as well. And then Spaces of Opportunity, that is the larger incubator farm where the food forest is located. So this incubator site has a ton of different farmers growing food, and they provide services related to technical assistance and training to help growers learn how to start a farm business and scale their operations. They provide some shared infrastructure, and for their grant project, they built out 5 shade structures around the 19-acre property to provide some heat relief for the farmers and farm workers that work at that site and grow food there. There are also spaces that can shade educational activities that are happening at the site. And then they also invested in some irrigation improvements to expand their water efficiency while supporting this larger heat safety response. And then the last is one of our new grantees. So we don't have an active picture yet, but they are building a food forest in neighborhood community garden as part of a collaboration with their neighborhood association. And so they're incorporating a lot of desert adapted fruit trees and shade trees to create a community space where people can come to learn about growing food and then also just have a space for the community and the surrounding neighbors to get together and talk about issues that matter to them, especially connected to food access and building connections with some of the community organizations that are nearby and operate within and surrounding their neighborhood. And then the last thing that I'll highlight is one of our urban ag pilot projects. So we have a couple of parcels of city-owned land that we're working with community organizations and some private organizations to grow food on and activate in different ways. So one that I want to highlight is our True Local Solar Container Farm. This is a project in West Phoenix where we're working with one of our largest indoor farmers here in the valley in Phoenix to grow food in shipping containers using hydroponics, so growing food in a water nutrient solution instead of in soil. And the whole food production is going to be powered by an on-site solar canopy. So it's providing shade for the site. And again, for people who are working in the containers, working on the site, there's going to be an educational component for neighbors to come from the surrounding neighborhoods to learn how to grow food using hydroponics. And then there's also going to incorporate some additional trees around the site that aren't on these renderings to help shade the pathway. There's a community center, it's a senior center right across the street, and that's going to be the recipient of the 20% of the produce from the site that's grown and donated to community organizations. And then 2 more things to highlight are some of the other initiatives from parts of our environmental programs team. So we also have a focus, like I said, on stormwater, surface water. We've developed a green stormwater infrastructure handbook for residents. So this outlines different strategies, plant palettes, and information on the design process for residents so that they can incorporate rainwater harvesting infrastructure into their home. It's available in English and Spanish. And then we have kind of an accompanying Sonoran Desert pollinator plant guide. Our office houses the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. And so we're committed to expanding pollinator, especially monarch habitat across the city. And so this highlights all the different native plants and what their needs are, where they're best suited to go, and how they could be used in collaboration with a green stormwater infrastructure design piece. So those are a couple of our programs that we have in OEP, and happy to take your questions after Dave's presentation.
Amazing. Thank you, Maddie. And yeah, it's amazing to see all of the work that you've done there. I started doing urban agriculture in Phoenix in 2009, and then we did a green stormwater pilot project in at the Phoenix Hostel in 2010. And so to see that early work, now the city actually has a like official residential handbook for stormwater infrastructure. I'm not sure I ever thought that was even going to be possible. So it's just so cool to see how these ideas have grown over the last 2 decades and more, and everything that your office has done. So thank you so much. Now, uh, when I first got to Phoenix, I also never would have imagined that the city of Phoenix would have an office of extreme heat, and one of the nation's first chief heat officers. And now not only do they have one, Dave, you've been at it for how long now?
Almost 5 years.
Almost 5 year anniversary coming up. So, with no further ado, Dave Hondula, also a professor at Arizona State University in the School of Geography, and has been working on extreme heat for a long time now. Supported cities, including Tempe, Scottsdale, and others before he became the chief heat officer about 5 years ago. And yeah, can't wait to hear about what you all have been up to.
Yeah, well, thanks, Braden, and thanks everyone for being here. And yeah, the viability of the chief heat officer model, I guess, is called into question. I think there were a couple weeks earlier this year where I may have been the only one left standing, as there's been some evolving thinking, let's say, around the role. But yeah, I suspect many of the folks who have joined today are the chief heat officers in their own right, in their own communities, or work with those people, even if not by that title. So a huge appreciation for everyone who's advancing heat work, across California, whether you're in parks or public works or wherever you might be. We know that the leadership on heat is really distributed. And thanks, Braden, for the chance to be here. And Angela, I mean, we're so inspired by this program and the thoughtful approach you all take to crafting the program. And we're learning a lot about how we can shape our programs just from hearing what you are doing. So thanks for the chance to engage. I'm going to go through 6 different examples here in the hopes that there's a little something on one of the slides that inspires some additional dialogue today. I hope there's something of interest. I don't know if any of the examples I'll have would have qualified for the grant program. I have to go back and think about that, but maybe pieces of them could be broken apart and cobbled together into something. And yeah, absolutely just wanted to acknowledge that what I'm going to share is by no means the work of the city or the heat office alone. Many partners involved from many different sectors outside the city, and doing a disservice to a lot of folks by not having enough logos on the slide. Something that's been really, really an important part of my learning curve at the city is how intersectional the heat work is. And I think it's like a fun challenge to look at our org chart or yours and think about, is there really any department that can be excluded from the heat work? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that there is. And as you'll hear me allude to, coming new into government work from the academic sector, really understanding what makes the gears turn in the implementing departments, and even in more like the process only departments like budget or law. That's been a really important part of our learning, and I hope you'll be able to take some of our lessons learned into your successful applications. Okay, so just very quickly, the high level slide similar to what Maddie has. As I know, planning is a topic of interest for the grant program. Uh, yeah, we don't have a heat plan at the city. We have a few different plans that address different parts of heat. And I see the city's climate action plan as the parent for all of this work, setting very high level policy direction under the framework of the city's general plan. And then 2 heat specific plans you may hear me refer to throughout the presentation include our recently adopted SHADE plan, the SHADE Phoenix plan. We're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of its adoption, very intentionally using the word shade there in the title. And then apparently we did not spring for the nice cover art on our annual heat response plan, and that has our strategies that we update each year that are specific to the summer season, cooling centers, outreach teams, et cetera. There are, of course, infinite ways to organize heat into the planning infrastructure of all of your organizations. This has been what ours is thus far. And there are heat mitigation initiatives that don't fit well right now, like our thinking around cool roofs does not have a plan home other than very high level reference in the climate action plan. So I think there's a lot of work to be done to think about how heat fits into plans, and maybe a chance to advance that. I'm going to share 1 initiative from our heat response plan and then 5 from the SHADE plan, because the SHADE plan has more in the way of infrastructure, given the program's emphasis on infrastructure. So 6 examples. We'll go through each pretty quickly, and looking forward to discussion. A huge city investment has been made here in improving the city's participation in the regional heat relief network of cooling centers, hydration stations, et cetera. And the big investment that we've made, big new investment over the past 3 years, is to provide 1 24/7 and multiple extended hour heat relief locations through the entirety of our heat season, May 1st through September 30th, or longer as needed. This year we're running 24/7 at the the building that you see pictured here. This is just a stone's throw away from the Diamondback Stadium in downtown Phoenix. For those who know the geography of Phoenix, it's a building that we're renting right now. So that's a cost. We're looking to buy our own, and that may push the budget limit here for those larger infrastructure projects, depending on where we are in the California market. I mean, yeah, there's certainly the facility cost, whether it's rent or to have a building, there's costs there. But what we've been really proud and grateful that we've been able to do is have a comprehensive staffing model at these locations, our enhanced locations, where we are trying to solve whatever challenge brought people to the heat relief site in the first place, whether it's related to homelessness, energy affordability, a power outage. We're really trying to, and I would say at a pretty good rate, connecting people to other services as they come through the door. This has not been a perfect operation by any means. The first year we did this, we really only looked within the universe of the city's own facilities for running 24/7 heat relief, and that landed us at the city's central library as the best fit for this program. And we knew there would be some challenging dynamics with the surrounding community trying to run 24/7 heat relief out of the city's central library. We knew it was coming. But I think it would be fair to say we underestimated both the scale of the impacts and the scale of the community sentiment resulting from some of those impacts. So probably could have got ahead of that a little bit more in a number of different ways. We then expanded our view the subsequent year to think about the larger real estate market that might be available, and we are very happy at our new location. Example two. Shade structures at schools. Of all the things that the heat office has done over 5 years, this has probably been the cleanest administratively. And maybe that's appealing to some on the phone who are listening in. With American Rescue Plan Act funds, we were able to issue sub-grants, sub-awards to 26 different schools or youth centers to build shade structures for the purposes that you see here. And we were really impressed by the diversity of ideas and sites where shade structures were built. Certainly many over playgrounds, some over sports courts, pickup and drop-off areas. We also see on the bottom, there are some portable ones that some schools invested in to use for evolving purposes for their curriculum. Each and programs. These types of shade structures are often in the five figures somewhere. So we were able to impact a fair number of schools with the allocation we had available. And while it was pretty clean administratively, we could have used more time and support for the schools going through the permitting process to do this construction. I think we could have provided more hand-holding, if you will, to help some schools who maybe have not gone through this process at all before. And we had a pretty tight timeline there, which got a little bit stressful for some of our applicants. We did support a number of small nonprofits who might run a charter school, maybe a daycare. And unfortunately, we were not able to develop a financial approach other than a reimbursement-based one, which was a stressor for them and probably discouraged even an application from some others in the community. So we wish we could have done something else there other than reimbursement-based. We've also been working with schools on tree planting, and I mean this is the impact here to come for decades probably can't be underestimated. Not just for the infrastructure investment at the schools, but also the engagement in urban forestry, learning about environmental systems. We have a great partnership with Arizona State University, the major public university here in the Phoenix area, and nonprofits who have really built a whole package around this program. It's not just trees in the ground. It's really earthwork at the sites, rainwater harvesting, and then an educational content as well that's engaging both the teachers and the students. The first iteration of this program did not include the earth moving component and nothing with green stormwater infrastructure. We wish we had done that sooner. And similarly to the shade structure program, I think we could have done more in providing administrative support. I am I'm sure there are schools that would have loved to participate and just didn't have the capacity to go through the application to learn, so learn about some of the legal expectations that, or maybe once they were in, they didn't know which vendors to go to. So I think we could have built more of that in on our side, and same challenge as well. Can we have a model other than reimbursement based one? Three more here. Neighborhood tree planting. We've loved. We've loved all these programs, but this one in particular, I think has really exceeded our expectations in terms of how it's brought neighbors together. Well, we are familiar with and have supported a variety of quote tree giveaway programs, and I have a tree that Braden gave to me in a giveaway program in our yard that is doing great. So I do not mean to downplay tree giveaway programs by any means, but what we've been so excited to invest in this program is that yes, we do give you the tree, but we also get the tree in the ground for you with professionals, and we think that's been that's really expanded the scope of who can participate, and it's increased the chance of tree survival. It's pure luck, Braden, that mine has made it. I think I don't have any magical green thumb, but yeah, it's doing great. But we think about sort of seniors or folks who might have more limited mobility, or folks who just aren't knowledgeable or interested in moving dirt around. We've been able to get trees in the ground with some of our local partners at a really good scale here. We've also hired and trained tree stewards in the parts of the city where this program has been implemented, who will be extra help, coaches, mentors, supporters for the trees. But where this program has really exceeded our expectation is in the community building aspect, such that we are now describing the trees almost as incidental part of this program. It is no exaggeration to say we get the trees in the ground, let's say Monday through Friday. They'll get put in maybe 10 homes per day, so 50 homes will be planted over the course of the week. Then Saturday, a resident will volunteer for their home, their front yard, to host a get together, and we'll bring some donuts and other light refreshments. And probably every other one of those celebrations that we'll have, which is almost every weekend in the fall, a spontaneous circle conversation will break out among the residents. Sometimes the city council member will drop in and they're workshopping and talking about some other neighborhood issue that has nothing to do with tree planting, or making concerns known to each other. They're meeting each other. Oh, you're the person who had this cool thing going. It's just been really special to see it happen, and the trees as the kind of glue that has brought everyone together. So we're really proud of that. This program too has, some things we wish we had thought through a little bit more. In Phoenix, right now, multifamily properties that want to plant trees require the full permitting treatment. And that's been a real shame when we've had multifamily approach us and say, we'd love to plant 4 trees in the ground. And we say, okay, here is this large, potentially expensive process for you to go through that has discouraged their participation. So we're thinking about how we could streamline that permitting. Where the property lines end in Phoenix in people's front yards and where the public right-of-way begins is not always obvious. For various reasons, we have not been able to plant or remove trees in the right-of-way, which in the residents' eyes has essentially meant the city's telling them that they can't plant city trees in the place that would make the most sense for them to plant those trees in their front yard next to the sidewalk. So we kind of got to get through the full legal thicket of issues there in the right-of-way. Plenty of room to plant trees elsewhere for the most part. And kind of a sad but fun success story of this program. We really pushed the law department and other city departments to make the agreement that residents would sign when they participate in this program as short as possible at the beginning. It's federal dollars, it's city process, so it's never going to be no agreement of any kind, as I understand it. The initial agreement to get 2 trees in the ground was 20 pages long that we were asking residents to sign. And that was our model for a couple of years. For sort of various political international relation dynamics, we were forced by some residents to revisit that agreement a couple of years ago. and we were able to get it down to 5. So we did make some progress there. Arguably, it's still way too much relative to getting 2 trees in the ground. But I encourage everyone to really push hard, against some of those, maybe not against, but really lean into the work with those process departments to see if we are not discouraging people from participating because of the default process that might exist for working with with the city or with your jurisdiction. Streetscape shade structures, we need a lot more shade on our streetscape, and trees don't work everywhere for various reasons. With City Council investment of American Rescue Plan Act dollars, we were able to build 19 of these that you see on the slide. These are places where people are forced to stop as they walk through the urban environment. Intersections or some of our mid-block hawk crossings as well have received these. The designs are from a local artist. They capture flora and fauna from the Sonoran Desert. You might be able to make it out a little bit there on the small photos. We've got teams right now that are measuring the effectiveness of the shade and talking to residents about how they feel about them. This was our first real lesson learned several years ago, that we had more to learn about what the process looks like to, I mean, the construction process, but also the maintenance component as well. The way we're set up, for those who are in local government, which I know isn't everyone on the call, we are not a capital project team here. So we can come up with good ideas all day long and bad ones, but we can't really implement them and push the paperwork through every step of the process. Another department needs to own them. And that department may have never asked or conceived of this project at the beginning. So we needed to have more conversation ahead of time with the implementing departments. We definitely spent a little bit of capital, political capital, kind of begging for cooperation to make this project go. Uh, Maybe one of the toughest parts in the history of the heat office has been the community conversation around these. I mean, it is no exaggeration. Like this document I have right here in my hand came from community workshops 5 years ago, and we can look through pages of this document that say we should have a shade structure at this intersection of the city. So we used that. This was work that Nature Conservancy did with community-based organizations. I mean, exactly the spirit, I think, Braden, of sort of what we're looking for in terms of partnership. So we said, all right, the intersection of 12th Street and Southern Ave, shade structure needs to be there. We took that as guidance into this program. And when we came out with our public meeting to announce that these were coming, we got some really serious heat about some of those locations. And I think either in the couple of years between the conversation that led to this and when we were ready to go, things had changed in those particular locations, and or different people were part of this process than showed up to listen to the public meeting about what was coming. And there was some pretty severe pushback about a few of the locations, not most of them, but a few of them, that ultimately we had to take them off the table for this to move forward, and we left a little bit of money on the table, and that was unfortunate. We hope we have the chance to go back to those locations soon. As you're looking at these pictures, especially the bottom one, may not appear that there's as much shade as there could be, and we won't argue about that now, but we really focus on getting the art into the mesh paneling at the top and getting a creative shade pattern on the ground. And maybe we lost a little bit too much shade. It could be argued, and we could debate about that. So maybe there are different ways to integrate art into structures like these. I think we would have revisited that, and maybe different types of art, sound, poetry. I don't know what it might be. And then the last example here, street tree projects, certainly something we're thinking about a lot, and hopefully green stormwater infrastructure. Kind of Braden alluded to, I never would have imagined that we had a handbook, et cetera. We still have a long way to go for mainstreaming GSI in Phoenix and maybe your communities too. That's why you see the bullet point suggests that we have hopes for green stormwater infrastructure. We have a couple different programs at the city that fund street tree planting. We are always we're on the quest for the holy grail of that really integrated project with multiple cooling features, multiple landowners. It's continuous in the way that Braden alluded to before. And I'll just draw your attention for those with really good eyes and can see that picture on the bottom. The green polygons that you can see right along the streetscape there show the land areas that the city is responsible for. And this is I think a good example that on the south side of the street that runs left to right, we have almost everything. And on the north side of that particular street, we have almost nothing. And there are as many patterns as you could imagine for tree governance on the streetscape exist in the city of Phoenix. And it makes it hard to find great opportunities to have that continuous quarter mile, half mile, mile that Braden alluded to before without partnering with businesses, without coming up with new memorandums of agreement and understanding for what the maintenance will be of streetscape features. So we are still working on that, still working to align the infrastructure of the city and the budget that we have with this beautiful concept of a cool corridor. A couple of decent examples so far, but certainly, certainly more to come ahead. And then finally, just given the heat that we are experiencing now, and many parts of California are as well, while these types of ideas are not necessarily great fits into grant program that has the infrastructure expectations that this one does, maybe there are opportunities to be creative in supporting paramedics with new field techniques like cold water immersion. Legal protections for workers and renters. We have some of those programs here in Phoenix, or training employees about what it means to work at a cooling center. We've been leaning into these as well. And if I was in your shoes with this opportunity on the table, I would be thinking, like, well, what could I do that would be a pilot implementation project that supports a path to a worker safety ordinance? I don't know what that is yet, but we would definitely be brainstorming a little bit of that on the Phoenix side. So I wish everybody well in developing their materials. I hope a little bit of what Maddie and I has had to say today has been useful for generating new ideas, or maybe eliminating some bad ones from your thinking. Thanks again so much, Angelo and Braden.
Awesome. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand, or you can use the Q&A function at the bottom. We can take about 7 to 10 minutes for